Just a warning, this video will have major spoilers for 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. Though if you're here, you've probably already played it. If you haven't, I strongly suggest saving this video for after you've beaten the game, because this is a piece of fiction that everyone needs to experience for themselves at some point. I heavily recommend the DS version if you have access to play that one, as the remaster featured in the Nonary Games port changes many things, multiple of which were for the worse. Okay, you've been warned. On with the video. 999 released in 2009 for the Nintendo DS and has since become an absolute cult classic amongst gamers today. It's a visual novel set on board the Titanic with a high-stakes death game looming over a cast of 9 characters. The game combines these visual novel segments with puzzle escape rooms to spice things up a bit. Choosing certain rooms in specific orders will lead you down different routes, mostly bad, and one good. On that true ending route is where the final puzzle of the game takes place, an intense fight for life and death spanning time and space, connecting characters bound by fate in hopes of changing the course of history as we know it. In the final stretch of the Nonary game, a young Akane Kurashiki is stuck within a room, on the verge of death, and forced by the host, Zero, to solve one last puzzle to escape. However, due to her young age and limited knowledge, she is unable to solve it alone. She has to call upon the help of her closest friend, Junpei, our protagonist, to help her. Junpei, however, is 9 years in the future, trapped in the same situation. A Nonary game held 9 years later, identical to the previous one, all in order to connect Junpei's mind with Akane's and save her. Of course, how they would do this would be to use the morphogenetic field, a pseudoscience concept coined by Rupert Sheldrake, who theorizes that everything in the world is connected by an unseen field of brainwaves that, when accessed, can send information across it through time and space. That is the basis for which the experiment is being held, and the recreation of it in the present. Across the different versions of 999, there are 3 different instances of this final puzzle. One in the DS version, one in the 999 Alterna novel adaptation, and one in the Nonary Games remaster. Here today I will set out to discuss each one, and what they do well and what they might not, and compare all of them, both in terms of the puzzle itself and the story moments surrounding it and how that affects the context of the scene. In the original DS version of 999, the top screen was used for dialogue and character sprites, while the bottom screen was used for third-person narration. Initially, we just think that the bottom screen is an inner monologue from Junpei, or a general narration like you see in a book. However, as it turns out, the narration was all being done by the young Akane looking through Junpei's eyes using the morphogenetic field. This is evidenced through a switch to first person by the narrator as the scenes in the past play out. The setup, payoff, and execution of this twist is absolutely genius, and one that can not only just be done in video games, but also only on a system like the DS. It uses the medium to tell a story unlike any other. The final puzzle is no different. Trapped in an incinerator with just moments left until it activates, Junpei and Akane are presented with a simple but challenging task: Sudoku. Throughout the game, as shown by the narration, Akane was looking through the eyes of Junpei and using him to help her solve puzzles. This time, however, instead of Akane looking through Junpei's eyes, we'd be playing as Junpei looking through Akane's eyes. To represent this switch in perspective, the DS screen is completely flipped upside down, a creative decision that stood out as an incredibly striking and memorable moment. This shift in view makes this part jump from a 10 to an 11, as it was already incredible with the song Morphogenetic Sorrow playing in the background. Here's what that song sounds like. This harrowing melody playing during this moment creates a melancholy but hopeful feeling as we attempt to solve the puzzle, seeing tears streaming down the young girl's face as we struggle. The song incorporates a leitmotif heard many times throughout the game, such as at the beginning of the intro, and at the start of escape rooms. There's one more thing I want to point out though, and it's the significance of the Sudoku puzzle. It's an everyday brain teaser, one that many know, yet not as many can solve easily. This makes it recognizable and perfect for a puzzle like this. But there's one more thing to it that I think makes it the perfect fit. And that's how it represents the nonary game as a whole. Think about it. The nonary game is 9 people attempting to all work together in order to escape. And to do that, they have to cleverly use their bracelet numbers to work in tandem and get through the doors together. Now take a look at the Sudoku. It's a 9x9 square, and you can use numbers 1 through 9 to place in their own unique spots, filling in spaces and perfectly fitting in everything to make it work in harmony together. That's what truly makes it genius. The themes surrounding the number 9 and how all of the characters need to work together and solve puzzles to all survive. Everything truly comes together at this moment. The stars align and create an absolutely phenomenal finale to an already great game. Now, as I mentioned before, there's actually a novel version of 999 released only in Japan known as 999 Alterna. I'm actually going to hold off on talking about this until the end, since the scenario for the finale is drastically different from its game counterpart, so we're going to temporarily put that on hold and talk about the 2017 remaster. Because the remaster was released on all modern platforms like Steam, PS4, and Xbox, sacrifices had to be made in order to attempt to keep the original twist intact while providing players with a more accessible way to play the game. The solution they came up with was, in short, not very good. They split dialogue and narration into 2 separate modes the player can switch between, called Adventure Mode and Novel Mode. You can choose to cycle between them, or stick with just one the whole time. Due to this, however, there's a good chance that the one playing might just stay on Adventure Mode the entire time, and only see dialogue. This is a problem because many lines of narration are important to the game and provide context for things happening. What they did to remedy this, though, was even worse. Most of the dialogue was completely rewritten to awkwardly fit in narration coming from characters speaking out loud. Junpei specifically constantly narrates what is happening to himself, even though there's no reason to, and no sane human being would do that. It's a poor attempt at translating this game to modern consoles, and even made the main twist more underwhelming, as now instead of revolving around the 2 screens of the DS, it just forces you out of Adventure Mode and into Novel Mode, called Junpei Vision and Akane Vision, during the final few bits of the game respectively, because God forbid the game have any subtlety and nuance like the original did. Of course, again due to modern hardware, there's nothing they can do like flip the screen upside down to represent a shift in perspective, so that idea was completely gutted. On top of that, they didn't even keep the Sudoku. They replaced the entire thing with this weird scrambled word puzzle, where you see a jumble of letters and numbers and have to arbitrarily spell the word password, where it then shows you a bunch of 9s, so of course you input a 9 on the next screen. That's it. What? Are you kidding me? This makes no sense to replace. It baffles me how they could take a near perfect scene and completely ruin it like this, making it a soulless shell of what it once was. The twist doesn't hit nearly as hard, and we don't see Akane's crying face on the screen as we attempt a somewhat long and difficult puzzle, and we don't have a puzzle that really means anything significant. Password? You've gotta be kidding me. On top of that, the puzzle takes so little time to complete compared to the Sudoku that any semblance of an extended moment of tension is gone. It's just over in a blink of an eye. This version of the finale, while still keeping the music and stress mostly intact, completely ruined what made the original so special, and, in my opinion, is one of the worst ways they could have done this, considering there was no reason to remove the Sudoku. I don't have much else to say about this. I just can't even begin to comprehend some of the creative choices made to the remaster. Let's just go ahead and talk about the novel version. So, although 999 Alterna only released in Japan, it has been translated into English, which I'll leave a link to in the description. As mentioned earlier, many changes were made to how everything plays out. First of all, the way the twist works. It's about as you'd expect, the narration that's mixed into the books switches to first person and jumps between Junpei's and Akane's perspectives. Not as good as the DS version, obviously, but not as atrociously bad as the remaster. It makes sense for a book. There's nothing special like flipping it upside down, but there's nothing offensive about it either. Now, the actual scene itself. Instead of being trapped in an incinerator, Junpei and Akane are trapped outside of it, in the chapel room with the 9 door, as well as the coffin in the room. A puzzle rises out of the ground, and is a Rubik's Cube. Similar to the Sudoku, it's a household puzzle that many know of, but not as many know how to solve. Unfortunately, there's obviously no music or visuals here, but what's described in the book is incredibly palpable and sets the scene well. Here's an excerpt from that moment. Less than 11 minutes before the ship would explode. Sweat covered my palms. Blood surged through every vein in my body. I felt feverish. I couldn't breathe. I was dizzy. My heart continued to rampage inside my chest, feeling like it would burst at any second. I held onto the silver clover light-handed me and prayed. "Help me, Jumpy! Help me, Jumpy!" I heard a scream from somewhere. "Connie?" I stopped with my hands and looked around. "What's going on with you?" Seven and Lotus stared at me in concern. Snake appeared to have realized something and listened closely to my every move. "Connie, can you hear me? Give me a sign! Connie!" I shouted with all my might, fueled by anticipation. "Jumpy?" I swung my head around. I heard his voice from somewhere. I scanned the room even though I knew he wasn't there. Still, his voice sounded so clear, almost as if he was right next to me. "Jumpy!" I shouted from the heart, filled with hope and emotion. A response came back immediately. "Connie! Jumpy!" To confirm each other's presence, we called out each other's names, over and over again. As you can see here, it seamlessly transitions from one perspective to the other, a subtle and well-executed way of writing that doesn't take too much away, even if it's very different and doesn't have as much stress and tension as the original. It does a decent job for what it is, and the Rubik's Cube puzzle isn't nearly as bad as the password featured in the remaster. It's still fitting, as each side has 9 tiles, and you have to match them all up, but isn't as clever as the Sudoku idea. So overall, it's fine enough, though some of the changes weren't exactly necessary. It is a very neat piece of history though, one not a ton of people might know about. So, to bring this video to a close, the original DS version easily had the best presentation, puzzle, and story out of all of them. It was a creative and inventive way to end the game and create a memorable twist for players that served a purpose within the context of the story as well. The novel did a fairly decent job at replicating that, even if there were a few odd changes here and there. It was certainly written well, and was engaging the entire time. The remaster, on the other hand, completely butchered that finale for no necessary reason, removing any sense of intrigue or emotion that puzzle had. It made the twist underwhelming and obvious, and was handled incredibly poorly. But hey, that's just my opinion though, so let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I will read all of them. They do mean a lot to me. If you made it here to the end of the video, you can feel free to subscribe to the channel, as I do intend to make more videos like this in the future, discussing different games or pieces of history and what I personally think of them. I even have something pretty big planned for the distant future, and I'll make sure to announce more about that when the time comes, so stay tuned. Anyways, that's all for me, and I hope to see all of you next time.